evening. Would like to call the Planning Commission meeting of October 30th, 2012. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Bondano.
Here.
Commissioner Borgens.
Here.
Commissioner Radcliffe.
Here.
Commissioner Taving.
Here.
Commissioner White.
Here.
Vice Chair Holt.
Here.
Chair Schmidt.
Here. Approval of minutes. First one, draft Planning Commission minutes for October 9th, 2012.
So moved.
Second. Motion by Commissioner Radcliffe, seconded by Commissioner Bondano. All in favor?
Aye.
Second approval of minutes is draft Planning Commission minutes meeting October 16th, 2012. Do you have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment or a change on page 15.
Commissioner White?
It states that I made a comment referring to 67 pumps. That should be 16 pumps on page 15, halfway down the paragraph.
That would be it.
It's a simple typo.
Very good. So I have a motion to approve the minutes by Commissioner Radcliffe, an amendment by Commissioner White from 67 pumps to 16 pumps. Do I have a second?
I have another correction.
No?
On page 16, the motion is noted as pass with all yes. That's incorrect. It should be 6-1 with me voting no.
I have a change or amendment by Commissioner Taving in regards to the roll call. Okay. So again, I have a motion to approve the minutes by Commissioner Radcliffe. Second.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Radcliffe. By Commissioner Borgens. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. So before we move on to oral communications, I wanted to get everybody up to play in regards to the meeting. Tonight's agenda includes two projects, one in which will include detailed subject matters and different public opinions. If you wish to speak on either one of these projects, please fill out a speaker card indicating which item you'd like to address, and I appreciate everybody doing that thus far. Either put Pete's Harbor agenda item number A or agenda item B, the vesting tentative map for One Marina. Remember, this is a repeat of the last meeting, so in these chambers and in the city, we respect each other's views, whether you may agree with it or not. My rules and that of the Commission regarding public comments still stand. Clapping, snickering, and outbursts of any kind will not be tolerated. I would also ask that all of you keep your comments focused on the project and that you keep any personal disparaging remarks outside of these chambers. You are more than welcome to hold your signs, just as we're doing here, on the ground, on your knees. Any signs that you want to wave around need to be done at the back wall. We cannot block our public's view. As I mentioned in the last meeting, if you want to quietly wave your fingers, I repeat, not the finger, but fingers, go right ahead. But do so, please, after the speaker speaks and not during it. If I get any indication by your actions that you are unwilling to follow these rules, I will have no problem in adjourning this meeting. During any one of our public comment times, each of you will be given 3 minutes to speak, and there will be no ceding of time. If you decide that after listening to a speaker that they said the same thing that you were going to say, you can simply let us know that you would like to pass on speaking, but that you would like to echo a speaker's comments. With that, I ask that we move and have a productive meeting. Next on the agenda, oral communications, and these are items that are not on the agenda. I have 5 speaker cards, and the first one is Brenda Kay.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak here. I really didn't think that I was going to have the opportunity here in the open session, but there was enough time. When I was going through the general plan with excitement as a boater, I first went to your element BE 129, recreational boating. And it's well written, but I was disappointed to see how short it was, and called up Blake and Bill and said, is there anything that I can do to help you flesh out your recreational boating plan for the city. So all I'm doing is offering my help, if you would like, while we're here in Redwood City, to flesh that out a little bit. And I look forward to the opportunity to see a little bit more interaction about the recreational boating. We came here and enjoy it, and anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Tony Lineberger? Tom? And also, if you'd like to let us know where you're from, please.
I live in Emerald Lakes area of Redwood City.
Thank you.
And I'm speaking now for Painters Local 913, which used to be located in Redwood City. It's no longer there. One thing that's been bothering me about the decisions made by this board is prevailing wage has gone out the door in all private business. And what that does is, like last year in my union, a third of our members were unemployed at any one time. And that's kind of standard. I'm in the painters union. The other unions are similar. And what we're doing is we're losing a middle class. In my union, because we had so few hours reported, our payments to our health and welfare went up from $7 an hour to $15, which meant no one could afford to take $7 an hour off their check, which meant most members lost their medical benefits. And this hurts all of us. And so I'm asking you to do something a little extraordinary and protect the middle class. This is not happening at the federal level. It's not happening at the state level. And we need it to happen at the local level. The biggest problem we've been having that I see in San Mateo County and certainly in Redwood City is the foreclosure. This month, there's 100 foreclosures scheduled to be sold right across where the count, right at the back of the courthouse, right on those steps. When those houses are sold, the money that goes to the county disappears by $20,000 every time one is sold. And also another problem is created with the million houses that have been foreclosed in California. There's now 5 million people looking for rental housing, and this explains why rental housing is going through the roof. So I think it's incumbent that you help protect the middle class, and it's up to you to figure out how to do that. I don't know how to do it. I know the federal government isn't doing it, the state government isn't doing it, and we're being crushed by what banks and Wall Street is doing to us. We're all being crushed, and it's up to you to put the brakes on it, and I'm not sure how to do that, but I'd gladly talk with any one of you about that issue. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. James Lee.
Good evening to the Planning Commission. My name is James Lee, and I also live in Redwood City, born and raised here. I want to talk briefly about an August 12th, or an article in the August 12th issue of the Redwood City Spectrum. Steve Penna, who's the editor, is seen by a lot of people in Redwood City as very council-friendly. Yet, in spite of that, he wrote a great article on how when some of us occupiers went to a city council meeting in April, there was an attempt by the council to censor us. There was an attempt to lecture us on our civility. And I want to talk a little bit about that article because we were surprised. Mr. Penna was very good about saying that in a democracy, these things are essential. I'm here to say that when you folks are the ones in power making decisions that impact our city greatly, it comes across to us as a little disingenuous to be policing us on our tone and our civility. We are not the ones in power here. We are coming to you for redress. And when we have a 2-second like, oh my gosh, or something like that as something you or someone else said, I think you should consider we're not doing that because we're here to hurt you or we're out to get you. We're here because, and we're frustrated because we feel like our concerns aren't being heard. When people's concerns aren't being heard and their perspectives are being erased, you will get incivility. That's the nature of what happens. And it's generally the people in a position of privilege who have the ability to say, we need to watch our tone. We need to watch how we word things here. I'm here today to support people who are losing their homes. I think there's nothing wrong with people who are maybe evicted by the beginning of next year being a little bit upset that they feel that their concerns aren't being heard. So I just want to have everyone here keep that in mind as we go forward with this meeting. I just really think that dissent is healthy for any democracy to exist and to be functional and healthy. And again, I just think it's really inconsiderate to talk about tone. When a port commissioner can come up here and call people to their face in the meeting last 2 weeks ago and say that they're lazy, they're couch surfers, they're just parasites who are mooching off a friend, and nothing is said about that person's tone and the offensive stuff they say, but stuff is said about the offensive tone of us here who are reacting to comments like that. That's a little disingenuous and hypocritical, so we'd like to see a little bit something different as we move forward here in Redwood City. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Joseph Rosas.
Good evening, residents of Redwood City, Planning Commission, Vice Chair, and Mr. Chair. I'd like to apologize for some comments that were made at the last meeting. I'm incredibly ashamed. They were disgusting and completely uncalled for. When somebody has the gall to call Redwood City residents squatters and dirty, and somebody that pollutes our water, somebody who claims to be a boater, yet if this was true, he would know that certain tanks would leak into a boat first, and you'd have to deal with it yourself before there would be any damage to the bay or any water. Once again, I'm sorry, Pete's Harbor residents, you should not be treated this way.
Thank you, Mr. Rosas. Mr. Buckley Stone.
Marv. Thank you for the time to speak. Need a technician. I would like to say just a couple things. First and foremost, I hope that there isn't a perception in this room that our dear friend Paula is a bad guy. The Uccelli family has treated me with such compassion and understanding through my hardest times. And I want to make sure that everybody knows that this is not an anti-Paula campaign. We love her. She's been very gracious to many of us, and we all know how much she has helped this city develop and the charities and the time spent. She's just crazy busy all the time, giving. Some folks might think that Paula's trying to do wrong to us, and that's not true. She has the right to retire. She's put her whole life into this Pete's Harbor. And it's not fair to her or the organizations that she supported, and it's disrespectful as well to even begin to think that there is some sort of evil plan. It's not in her nature. She's loving and giving. And I want to make sure that this audience respects that. We're all scrambling, looking for a place to live. It's hard on all of us. There's a heavy weight of stress at the marina. And people are suffering from that. We're confused about how this wonderful city of Redwood City could just, allow something such a dramatic change and have the process fast-tracked through. It's leaving us spinning. But I guess the message I really, really want to make sure that we all understand is that we can do better. We're for development. We want this city to do well. And we want everybody to come to a place where we all can find a place of neutral ground or a way to just come together because Redwood City is its best when we work together with each other. I want to thank you guys for your time, and I want you to know how much I respect all of you for the hard work you do for this city. And I expect people in this audience to give Paula the respect that's due to her. She's been a dear friend to me for over 20 years, and I won't tolerate anybody saying anything that might offend her or her intent.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. That was my last speaker card for oral communications. There is no consent calendar, so we'll move on to our... Oh, I didn't get one. Or maybe I put you in the other one. Why don't you come on up? And if you can just state your name when you're up there, please.
Sean Cartwright, Peninsula Direct Action. You had opened the meeting by saying that you wanted everyone to respect each other's views. And I just wanted to say that it goes in every direction. And I wanted to point out that there's little things like when I say that I'm wearing these fabulous boots because in case Pinocchio strikes again, everyone knows what I'm talking about, that you should admonish me because I had called somebody Pinocchio last time I was here. So you should admonish me because I'm making sort of a public attack on somebody. You should admonish me, much like you should admonish those who use the phrase squatters and couch surfers because they are really putting people down and people who are none of those things. And that's not respecting people's views. You should not admonish speakers who point out the hypocrisy of someone bullying liveaboards. When they leave, when these people just go around the harbor and they leave and they could be gone a day, they could be gone a couple days, they don't even know if they're leaving. They come back to find caution tape across their slip. And this is a form of bullying, and that's what's going on. So when they leave, this is the kind of bullying that they're finding out. So to me, that's bullying. And so when people point out that somebody receives an award for anti-bullying and they find that to be hypocritical, they should not be admonished for pointing those things out at all. That's hypocrisy. So I'm hoping that we will respect each other's views, both your views, our views, and the people who are against us, their views as well, because it all goes both ways. Everyone has to respect each other's views. And I am wearing these boots just in case Pinocchio strikes again.
Thank you, Ms. Cartwright.
Got another individual that indicated they put in a card.
Sorry, the card got lost.
Your name?
Nancy Arvold. I've been a resident and an employee in Redwood City for over a dozen years, and I do live in Peace Harbor. My request, it's actually that I want to implore you to do something I think is really difficult, which is to really step back from what I think the decisions that you've made and really be open to seeing a different side of it. And in the doing that, to really look and see what would be a win-win situation. I think there's a way to have the development in a different way that really honors the space that Peace Harbor has been for 60 years and allows the citizens of Redwood City to have that be something that remains and that they're proud of. You know, I look at the years that the fireworks happened in July 4th, and I've talked to people who for years go, oh yeah, I've been to Peace Harbor for years. And there's something about that is...
Mrs. Arvold, just a quick, are you talking, are you wanting to talk on Peace Harbor? Or are you just...
No, I want to talk about the openness of y'all being able to be open to new decisions when you've really worked hard and have kind of come to a decision. It's really more of that. And I'm not sure that you can do that when you've really done as much work as you have to get where you are. But I think not just with this situation today, but in general, to be open to what would be a win-win, what would have everybody really be satisfied, I think is something that would be a really important process to follow. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Arnold. So I believe that is now the end of our speaker cards for oral communication. So our next item on the agenda is our public hearing on Pete's Harbor. And I think Mr. Lyons will come up and give a presentation.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners and audience. My name is Blake Lyon. I'm with the Planning Division in your Community Development Department. I'm going to take a few minutes tonight and do a bit of an introduction and try to frame a few things for you. There's been a lot of public comment that we've received in the meetings leading up to this, to tonight's meeting, and through various email letters and correspondence that I wanted to address, because there's a few things that, if I'm generalizing it, begin to represent a lot of issues that relate to the sale and property ownership of this property, which is not something the city gets involved with, the private purchase and sale and some of the tenancy issues. So we're going to try to separate that a little bit and get you to identify those things that are within the Commission's purview with regard to the land use policy decisions and implications, and then try to correct some misinformation that's been conveyed in some of the letters. So I'm going to take a few minutes to do that, and then we'll go right into the public comment portion of tonight's meeting. You'll hear from a lot of the folks that are here tonight, and then at the conclusion of that, we'll get into deliberation and discussion, and we're certainly here to answer any questions. We've got Amy McPhee, who's our contract planner, and Ray Pendro here to my left with MIG environmental consultant, and we'll move forward in there. Now, I've thought a lot about trying to make sure I can convey this in a way that doesn't downplay the emotions that are around this issue. As people, I understand that you want to be caring and thoughtful and empathetic, and I know all of you, and I've worked with all of you long enough to know that's who you are as people. Your role as a planning commissioner is more defined than that, and it's an obligation from the staff perspective not to advocate for any project. That's not what my role or responsibility here is.
Hold on for 1 second. The fingers are okay, but the signs, I said, not up. Can we do that? As long as, and his was up. I'm not going to get in an argument on this one. Continue, Mr. Lyons.
Thank you. And what I'm trying to frame for you tonight is really those policy decisions, and make sure you understand kind of where that falls within your purview. And so, forgive me if I labor on that a little bit, but I'm going to try to take you to that direction. So, the meeting that was held on the 16th is all on the city's website. People can go back and review that. I'm not going to go through all the details of the project description. We have the applicant here. We've got the property owner. If you have clarifying questions, we can get up and discuss this. But the thing I wanted to mention about this slide in front of you is, and it will speak to this issue later in my presentation, which is the Marina Shores Village project that was considered were legislative acts. Anytime you change the general plan, land use designation, and or the zoning, that's subject to referendum. And I'll touch on kind of the history of the general plan land use designation, so it brings some clarity to some things that have been miscommunicated in some of the correspondence. I won't go through the existing setting. There's a lot of folks that live out there that can give you more detail on the ins and outs of it than I, but happy to discuss it if you wish. And then we have the development proposal that you saw on the 16th. And we can go through any of the parking exceptions or modifications if you wish to go back through those level of details. So I'm going to focus you on three topics that were kind of raised in some of the communications that we've received so far. This is the 1990 General Plan Land Use Map. And I want to go through a little progression of how that's played out. If you zoom in on this area identified by the dashed rectangle and you go in, you'll see that Pete's Harbor location is identified in this circle. The 1975. It's indicated here, and it shows the commercial and employment land use designations on those properties. If you fast forward then to 1990, again, this is the citywide general plan land use designation, and zooming in on this portion of it, you'll get a little closer and you'll see the Pete's Harbor portion land use designation was changed to mixed use and allow for commercial and residential. And then you go through, and this is where the communication has been a little bit misleading. The land use designation, as we started pursuing the 2010 general plan, we did a number of public workshops. Many of you were on the commission at that time and were involved in that in one form or another. And you saw the various different alternatives that were put out in workshops in 2008 and 2009. And in those discussions, this column here on the left is the existing, and then we get into various different alternatives. At the workshop that we did in September of 2008, there were 5 different alternatives that were identified. All 5 of those alternatives called out the Pete's Harbor as mixed-use waterfront. And the miscommunication that I think that exists is some folks think that that was mixed-use marina, and that was not what was presented in these. It was not part of that discussion. We do have that marina designation elsewhere in the city, but was never contemplated for this particular site and location. And so we then came back in 2009. We looked at a 6th alternative and a 7th alternative, and ultimately landed with the 2010 general plan, which kept that same land use designation as mixed-use waterfront, which does allow straight residential, some commercial. There's no height limit in there. It allows up to 40 units to the acre. And so that is the general plan designation, land use designation that's put in front of you in the 2010 general plan. Then we get into the zoning specifics, and again, we have CGR zoning that's in here, and this is again kind of that micro view of what's allowed out there on that particular property. And I want to touch on the fact that it's a combining district. So the base zoning is the general commercial, which is referenced in Article 15 of the zoning ordinance. Then you get this combining in Article 25, and it says, and I'll direct your attention to item B here, residential uses may be permitted in an R combining district if a planned development permit is approved for the project. That's what warrants this proposal in front of you as a planned development permit, and then it defers you, if you see on item C here, defers you to the multifamily high density regulations that are in Article 10 of the zoning ordinance, and that's what sets the various different land use requirements in there. So the third piece I'll touch on tonight is there's been some confusion over the inner harbor area and the discussion of whether this is in or out. And the thing that I want to draw to your attention, there was and I understand where the confusion lies, and let me try to clarify it a little bit. There was some communications that came out of the city about trying to identify what area is in, what area is out, and kind of define those borders. The June 25th City Council meeting identified and used this map and identified kind of a stakeholder area which sought to solicit input from folks that resided on property, businesses, and the like in that area. And then if you look at our current thought process for the study area, it's identified by this border in red here. Now, again, this is a contemplated study area. This area has ebbed and flowed. It's not a defined parameters yet. We're moving forward to that. We're talking about that. The mayor went to design shred in February. We talked about a slightly different area. All of that is up for discussion in front of the city council. But what I do want to point out is that when we get development proposals that come in, we're required to evaluate those development proposals on the rules and regulations that are in effect at the time the decision is being made, and not for a speculative or a future issue. And so we're required to have you all consider the rules in place at this particular time. So whether the boundaries of this stay this as defined here in the red, or they begin to change, you have a consideration in front of you tonight that we want you to be well aware of. There was some additional discussion about these projects being the same project. They are the same in that it is a reduction of the previous project, and they are evaluated under the same EIR. They are not the same with respect to development intensity, specifically height, development density that's being proposed. And so I've tried to take this chart, which was a more expanded version of this was provided in the last meeting, and simplify it a little bit, because this is a significant or substantial reduction from the previous project that Marina Shores Village contemplated when it was taken under consideration back then. So happy to give you some additional clarifying statements. I think the two that we can also address, there was some concerns that was raised by an individual about sea level rise, and there's been some discussion about affordable housing. We're happy to go into any of those details should it be your wish. So I'll leave it at that for now, and take my seat and let you hear from the rest of the folks, unless there's any clarifying questions at this point in time.
Any clarifying questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Bondano?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lyon, the graphic that showed sort of the current boundaries for the Inner Harbor study area, there exactly. If you said it, I didn't catch it, and I don't see it here. So, what date or what year was this red line boundary sort of?
We're giving you a preview of what staff has been working through in response to coming back to the City Council. So this is the first time this has been shared publicly in terms of this definitive boundary. So again, it is a discussion that is currently open.
Okay. Thank you.
Any more clarifying questions? Great. So at this time, I'd like to. Do we need to make a motion to reopen the public hearing?
Chair Schmidt, you never closed the public hearing, so you can just continue the public hearing at this time.
Okay, perfect. So at this time, we'll start with our public hearing. Remember, you have 3 minutes to speak, and if you want to pass because somebody said something else, please just let us know, and let's move forward. Marilee Robinson, and I'm going to tee up two other people as well. Charlene Wright and Mike Kastrup.
All right. Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Marilee Robinson, and I'm losing my voice. I'm a native citizen here to Redwood City. It would be sad to see that Pete's Harbor, as I've always known it, to become a development of the kind presented. But I would like to include our whole community, as I've always seen. It feels like a whole neighborhood would be. If I went over to a Roosevelt neighborhood and just took out a neighborhood, these are my neighbors too. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about the Pete's Harbor per se, the development. I'm here to speak on and ask your. Let me get calm. I'm sorry. I'm here to ask for your support and help. I park my trailer at Pete's Harbor. I'm in dry storage. What happens is the police, when I park my trailer in my neighborhood overnight, which is supposedly permittable, but I get tickets. I have permission from the neighbor. In the neighborhood I live in, there are two houses that face a street, and I park on the side of these two neighbors' houses, and I'm on one side of the street that neighbor has given me permission to park there while I load or unload or work on my rig because I can't pull the slides out at Pete's. There's not enough room. And I've been ticketed, and the police are like, well, it's because you have a commercial truck. It's a pickup truck. That would mean every single pickup truck in Redwood City that parks on the street should get a ticket. So, we were supposed to have 72 hours to before we have to move. That doesn't happen. It's 24 hours or less. I get a ticket. I'd like help with the police. I also would like help in finding locations that are as reasonable as Pete's Harbor, that are as clean as Pete's Harbor, in the Redwood City area. I'd have to go across the bay to find something comparable, where I can get my truck and trailer maneuvered into a location, place like the self-storage locations. They have some for trailers, but I can't necessarily maneuver in there, and I am a trained driver. I know how to drive buses and whatever. So I know that the city has property, so I'm asking for an extension of, time to find a more suitable location, but I know that they have the jail area, the behind the police station lots, those are, just be creative in finding some support for us to find locations that are local, keep our money local. So I'm asking the police back off on the ticketing RVs, and I'm asking for finding location. Is that my red?
Robinson.
Yes? Was that red? I don't see a color.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Charlene Wright. Charlene. I should know better.
Good evening, Mr. Chairperson. Let me just correct the pronunciation. It's Chairlene, right? Resident of Redwood City. Thank you. This is for those of you who don't know, this is the 60th anniversary of Pete's Harbor. When Pete built the harbor, the area east of 101 was essentially closed off. He opened that side of 101 to both housing and business. Pete told people for about 10 years prior to his passing that it was his intention to take this piece of property to the next level. He met with several developers over the years, and of all of them, he chose Paul Powers. Mr. Powers is building and has completed several projects in San Mateo County. He was Pete's choice to steward this piece of property into its next phase. I checked in this evening, and approximately half of the liveaboards at Pete's Harbor have already given notice. However, no eviction notices have been served. Many people in this room have stood up and talked about Pete Uccelli's legacy, and this project is certainly a part of his legacy, both his legacy and that of the entire Uccelli family. This piece of property is a piece of what the Uccellis have stewarded and done in Redwood City, but it's not all of it. They started and created the Sequoia Awards. They supported Kainos Home and Training Center, the Police Activities Leagues, and there are dozens of nonprofits and individuals in this community that would not have survived over the years were it not for the help and the support of the Uccelli family. They've contributed their time, their money, and their name over the years. Before I end, and I'm doing my best to be under 3 minutes, I want to say that this is a conforming project. It conforms to the zoning and the usage in that property and in that area. It is absolutely a benefit to the community overall. And I urge you to support this wholeheartedly and move it forward to the council for approval. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. Mike Kastrup.
Good evening, Chairman Schmidt, Commissioners. My name is Mike Kastrop, and I've lived in Redwood City for over 25 years, and you know me as an architect and also as president of the Downtown Business Group. But what you may not know is that I've also been sailing for most of my life, over 45 years. I've raced and owned boats, and I currently own a boat that's up in the San Francisco Marina. As an architect, I've reviewed the proposed development and find it to be nicely designed. It's appropriate for Redwood City, and it meets the design parameters of the zoning codes. The styles and features are elegant, and the public access is inviting. The parking is appropriate without becoming a dominant factor, and the heights of the buildings are within the guidelines. This is a quality project, and I'll be glad to see this area of our city improved. As a sailor, I run a berth in the San Francisco Marina on a month-to-month basis, just like many of the people here. And I know that this situation can change at the will of the owner of the marina. I wouldn't be happy about it, but that's how it works. There are no guarantees, and you just deal with it. As a side note, something we don't do here is I get assessed property tax on the slip in San Francisco. So there's actually, something else in there too. So I was the one that at Portfest on October 6th, I was approached and asked to sign a petition to save Pete's Harbor. So I asked, what do you mean? I was told that an out-of-town developer was going to kick 500 people out of their homes, fill in the harbor, and build massive buildings on the site. I refused to sign. But I can understand a lot of people would be concerned and would sign since the information provided was distorted and misleading. I believe that this proposed development is what will fulfill Pete and Paula's dream. And for Pete's sake, I ask that you approve the proposed plan development. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Castro. Eric Mueller, Tim Ron, followed by Jack Castle.
Thank you. My name is Eric Mueller. A couple of items I noted on the EIR that didn't seem to be addressed. The EIR does not address known contamination issues that I could find. And in the 2008 General Plan Hazardous Materials Background Report, it listed Pete's Harbor as having not reported for hazmat and closed actions. It was a boatyard. You've got pretty much a guarantee that you're going to have heavy metal contamination, copper, lead, zinc, others. You're also going to have toxic chemicals that were present as a result of the boat operations. I can't find anything in the EIR that addresses this. So my question to the Planning Commission is, how are you going to address this? Some boatyard operations have become Superfund sites. I'd hate to see that happen here. So I think it's part of the question is, how are we going to address this? And how are we going to allow this to move forward with that? Another question I had is they're mentioning about a 17-second delay at a nearby intersection, and we're talking close to 1,000 vehicles being added to essentially a 2-lane street, 1 lane each direction, and that doesn't seem to match with what I would expect. And I was curious as to where those numbers were obtained and how they were gotten. The other point I wanted to make is that also with the marina, they're planning on filling that with the residents. I'd like to find out what their plan is if that doesn't work. Because currently Bear Island, I think, has less than 5% of the slips filled by current residents. So the question there is, what are you going to do with the slips if you don't fill them the way you're advertised? What's going to happen with them? Are they going to become publicly available? What's the plan? I think I'll leave it at that since my time's essentially out. But thank you very much for the time to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mueller. Mr. Tim Ron?
Thank you for hearing my voice tonight. I believe that approval of this proposed development would represent a significant loss of cultural and civic potential for this area. It expresses to me, this proposal, a lack of appropriate, comprehensive, and integrated vision. All of the proposals submitted by the Pulse Corporation for this site through the years appear to hinge on a basic developmental vision to create residences closer to where people work in this Silicon Valley. This idea places Highway 101 at the heart of Redwood City, and this vision recognizes Redwood City as a prime bedroom community location for the Silicon Valley. For one, I see the water, a connection to the sea, as the heart of Redwood City. I see a distinct potential for Redwood City to emerge more as a community unto itself over time, with that kind of connectivity at its heart. This proposal offers to build a private residential bedroom community with very limited potential use over time. And will build over the top of it a diverse and unique site which offers ample potential for increasing use over time. This development will create a dead-end, private-feeling waterfront in a mixed-use zone that could support a vibrant live-work architecture that engages and integrates with the waterfront as well as with a community on the water. The narrative that accompanies this development states that all 263 slips of the marina will be retained, but if you look at the proposed plan and consider how many residents out of 411 would have to rent 50-foot, 40-foot, and 30-foot slips, the viability of a private marina seems dubious. And unlike the marina at the villas next door, there would be basically no parking available should the marina at Pete's need to offer slips to the public just to survive. And so in terms of its connection to the sea, what is Redwood City left with after the Pulse Corporation finishes its work? The one marina development that destroyed exactly one marina, and the Peace Harbor community that will cripple, maybe destroy exactly one harbor. There's been a lot of mention of change by proponents of the development, saying that the opponents should not fear change. I oppose this development because I want to see change. I want to see a change of vision on the part of stakeholders and designers of this proposal. Development at this site could cultivate a richly diverse, compact, mixed-use, live-work waterfront and seafaring community. I encourage the Commission to take the time to integrate further public input and professional analysis. I would suggest that the Commission require the developer to investigate a true mixed-use alternative, an alternative that truly retains and enhances this important waterfront interface and more effectively cultivates the broad potential that this site offers to the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Run. Mr. Jack Castle.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is John Castle. I want to thank you for allowing all the citizens to participate in this discussion, and they can offer their opinions. I was raised here in Redwood City. My family lives here in Redwood City. My business is here in Redwood City, and my family's been involved in the city for over 60 years. For a number of years, I served on various boards and commissions in the city. For 10 years, I was on the Planning Commission doing the hard work that you're doing now. I'd like to point out that during that 10-year period, there was substantial growth in Redwood Shores. At that time, there were a number of people in the community that did not want to see it developed, and there were a lot of people that were pro-development. And I can only tell you that I'm proud of what's out there. I think it's a valuable asset to Redwood City, and it's a beautiful community. My office is located on Bear Island Road, right across the street from Mr. Paul's current project. He's a good neighbor. He's been concerned about traffic. He's built a quality project, and I think that you can evidence that by taking a look at what he has done out there. I'd like to make two quick points. First, for decades, the Planning Commission, other various bodies in the city have worked hard to achieve a housing jobs balance in the city. And I think the city has done a remarkable job in trying to get to that. You have to ask the question, where are people going to live? I mean, we've chased away so many jobs, so many people. We have city employees that commute from far away. The second point is, you've heard this before, but bear with me for a quick minute. The Uccellis have been in the forefront of everything that's been going on in Redwood City. If there was ever a first family in Redwood City, it would be Pete and Paula. Whenever there was a need for something here, someone stepped up, and it was usually Pete and Paula. Paula continues to serve our community. She sits on several boards and several nonprofits. She gives of her time, money, and she works tirelessly to help those in need. I've not seen a more giving couple than Pete and Paula. For years, everyone in Redwood City has known that Pete and Paula intended to develop their property. It wasn't a secret. It's been going on for more than 10 years. Let me again say that Pete and Paula have been very straightforward in making their intentions known to everyone, including the tenants of the harbor, that the property was to be developed. Thank you for your service to the citizens of Redwood City, and we appreciate your efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Castle, and thank you for your previous years of service to Redwood City. Buckley Stone, Jim Kirkland, and Wendy Stone.
I'm back. Thank you for the time to speak. You know, if I could have things go the way I would like to have them go, I would have left Pete's Harbor with a tear in my eye, but be grateful. We received a letter in July, and we were convinced that it was business as usual. And Pete's Harbor matters. I mean, the wildlife, the culture, salty people, and community. It matters. It is something. When people found out on September 20th that they would have to make arrangements, that they had until probably January 15th, the newbies, who really didn't have a vested interest or much history at Pete's Harbor, fled. And when they did that, they grabbed every available slip from here to the Bay Bridge where they could live aboard. And when they couldn't do that in the Bay, they went to Pillar Point. We call it Pete's Harbor West. I can't go there. I can't drive the highway of death. I have to go to the VA. This is where I've been living for 20 years. Redwood City is my home. And I love the development, the culture. I know where my post office is. I've served on jury duty. I'm proud of this city. A little piece of it's going to die. No matter what RWC, Harbor Communities, LLC does, no matter what he does, the character of Redwood City will be changed forever. The commission was appointed by the council and overseen by the manager. And I can't help but feel that this process is being just shot right down the rail without people from the other side of Highway 101 even knowing about it. It's going to happen. Change is going to happen. Everything is impermanent. In fact, the only thing that's permanent is impermanence. I feel we could do a better job for the community, for Pete's Harbor, for Paula, for Redwood City. Take your time and let's do this right. It'll be a whole lot easier for everybody. And we would really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Stone.
Thank you very much.
Jim Kirkland.
I'm a longtime resident of Redwood City. And I too will miss Pete's Harbor when it's gone. After all, it's been an intricate part of Redwood City for well over 60 years. And I do sympathize with those who have made it their home and now have to leave. However, if there's one thing I have learned from living in the Silicon Valley is that things change. It seems that one has to constantly adapt if you want to live here. With that said, I must also say that I believe in the long-standing position that this great country holds for free enterprise and the rights of an individual to sell their property for profit or any other reason that they choose. I'm confident that the housing project replacing the harbor will continue to serve our community through much-needed housing, jobs, and tax revenue. I would like to add that Redwood City has been working hard to revitalize and return to prosperity after too many years of difficult economic times. So we don't need to be occupied. Keep that in Wall Street where it belongs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkland. Wendy Stone.
Hi, I'm Wendy Stone, and I'd like to thank the supporters of Peace Harbor for being here and members supporting fair political practices. I asked my son, he's 27, what his take was on this whole big corporation greed / small town corruption type thing regarding Pete's Harbor. And he paused from his homework long enough to say, "Oh yeah, that kind of thing happens everywhere, all the time." Well, aren't I the naive one? I've been furious, shocked, saddened, and amazed alternately and all at once to think that this jewel of a landmark, Pete's Harbor, with all of its character, warmth, community, history, uniqueness, wildlife, and natural beauty could just be wiped out, suddenly and completely, as if it had never been. And for what? Apartments that could be built anywhere? To those who would say that we residents resist change, I say this. There's nothing new about huge companies screwing the little guy. Please, it's been done to death. I think real change would be effected if the members of this city hall would actually serve their constituents by rallying with the voters to fend off the big bullies instead of climbing into bed with them. My only recourse with this sorry lot is to vote for different council members next election in hopes that they appoint truly worthy public servants. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stone. Next three speakers, Hector Flamenco, Murray Weber, Faith Riley. Hector Flamenco? Not here. Following Faith Riley will be Roger Smith. So first in line is Murray Weber.
Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Murray Weber. I'm a resident of Redwood City for 25 years. I own a home. I own a business. And I chose to live at Pete's Harbor. I bought a boat just to live there. I love Pete's Harbor. It's a very, very special place. There's nothing like it. And I sure would hate to see the harbor and the restaurant be gone. I think that there could be some development there. There's a lot of land there. But I think the marina and the restaurant should be left alone. Every Monday night, my kids come to my boat, and we have dinner together. And if I have to move, that's going to have to stop, and I'm going to have to sell my boat, because I'll have to move too far away to be able to do that anymore. So that's about all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Faith Riley.
Hi, my name is Faith Riley, and I own a home in Redwood City. First of all, I want you to I'm requesting you to consider my submitted papers that I gave you last week. Just make sure you have that on record. Last week, Mr. Hanning quoted you a series of figures that you should consider if you delay your decision. I want you also to consider what you might lose if you rush your decision. I ask you to consider all of Redwood City's ability to truly access this unique waterfront location and not give it to just the privileged few who can rent the units or who are physically capable of riding their bikes or walking the long distances to the waterfront via the trail that will be created. So that leads me to my first topic that I'd like to talk about. This plan is not in compliance with its zoning requirements for parking, and they are requesting a modification per Article 43.7. I am asking the Commission not to give this modification. No matter the twisting of rules about what standard they should really be held to, within this zone definition, they are short 120 of 925 spots. CEQA Technical Advice Series says also, avoid deferred mitigation and mitigation measures consisting of monitoring and future studies not tied to performance standards and contingencies. A lot of their mitigation measures use the word monitoring. One of their suggested deferred mitigation measures or contingency plans includes the possibility of project build-out and design provisions to permit parking expansion, perhaps through the ability to construct additional parking decks after 3 years. If their monitoring shows that they need more parking, the parking structure is already the maximum height for their zone, which is 75 feet. This means that they'd have to come back to your commission and ask for yet another less acceptable exemption to their zoning requirement when parking is not sufficient. I think that you should prevent that from occurring while you have that opportunity before they start building, and ask them to reduce their number of residents. This is a unique location because it's situated at the end of a single access road with no place for parking overflow, so it's more likely to experience parking issues, not less, and it should be restricted, not less restricted. Their plans include public access walkways, open space, vistas, but there's no public access parking to enjoy them. So the location is at the far end of each alley.
Thank you, Ms. Riley.
Okay, thank you.
Roger Smith.
Hi, everyone. My name is Roger Smith, and I live at Peace Harbor for the last 7 years with my dog, Lexi, my black lab. And I'm actually a native of California and lived in the peninsula for many years. I've been around harbors and boats all my life. I worked at a yacht marina in Santa Barbara. I also took a boating and sailing class, and I've always been enamored by the people who had boats and been out in the water and love it. So when I ended up at Peace Harbor, I thought this was really great. I'm not retired. I am part of a group working on an internet startup, as well as I own a junior girls volleyball club, which I coach at and direct. And I also do some handyman projects for good friends of mine. I want to second what Buckley said originally about Paula Shelley and Pete Shelley, her late husband. I am also very, very thankful for what they have done over the years. Long before I lived here, I would visit Peace Harbor with my family and with people from work, from when they came from HP. So I'm very, very appreciative of what she's done, and certainly have no problem at all with her wanting to sell her place and retire. That's certainly well within her rights and no problem. My issue is more with what's going to happen to the property once it's been sold. The question now is, will it be something that you will still look back on and say, gee, Peace Harbor is still a great place to go out and see and to go to the restaurant and have good public access to, as opposed to, of course, a lot of apartments and so forth. I just wonder whether that's really the right thing to do, and there are a lot of questions. So my main point to you is this. If you remember, you probably all have seen the first Jurassic Park movie. At the very beginning of that movie, they're sitting around talking, and the creator says, gee, I've made all these great dinosaurs. Isn't this wonderful? We've got this technology. And Jeff Goldblum looks at him and says, you were so busy and congratulating yourselves on knowing how to do this, you forgot to ask yourself whether you should do it. And this is something I think you really should think about. I really, by the way, very appreciate what you've done. I sat through a city council meeting when you talked about the downtown development and the precise plan that preceded it, and everybody heaped praise on the whole process, and I thought that was great. It's a success. You want a success here, you should have a precise plan for Peace Harbor, or certainly for the Inner Harbor. I would suggest you do that, and you'll end up having a success. Everybody will be happy. The public, the residents, the developers, Paula and her family, everybody will be happy that they really put in all what needs to be done to make this right. It's not just about doing the exact things that are required by like a zoning regulation. Is it the right thing? there's probably a development that will work.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Jackie Pitts, followed by Donnie, and followed by David H. Okay, just to make sure, no, Donnie's not here. Okay. Jackie Pitts is not here. Okay. Following, David, what is your last name again?
Hattery.
Will be Allison Madden and Brenda Hattery.
This place matters. Redwood City has nice procedures and processes for ensuring responsible development. So what has happened? The 2003 EIR contains substantial detail on how displaced boats and liveaboard boaters at Pete's will be retained within Redwood City. As described in Appendix B of our written submission, the impact mitigation included 408 brand new slips, including 60 new liveaboard slips. Thus, the mitigated impact from the loss of slips was reduced to less than significant and only required about 30 liveaboard boaters to find a new home in another city or another county. A lot has happened since 2003, and we were on the edge of our seats to find out how Redwood City planned to let the developer mitigate the impact of slip loss now that only a fraction of those 408 slips have been built and only a couple of the 60 planned liveaboard slips were available on September 20th. It was shocking to see that the only change described in the 2012 update was the retention of about 65 more private-only slips in the inner marina, absolutely no mention of the now huge public slip and liveaboard deficit within Redwood City. We hear Paula's lawyer urge the Planning Commission forward with not a single day of delay because of the potential loss of millions to the city. In addition to the personal hardships that we've heard about, what are the costs to Redwood City of this gross failure to update the EIR? Using the best national data we could find, each registered boat is associated with on average $8,600 a year in additional regional economic activity. The EIR goes into the 427 slips lost at Peninsula, and indications are that few, if any, of those slips will ever be recovered. Add in that adds up to $3.6 million per year. Over 10 years, $36 million. Add in the public slips being closed at Pete's, and what you get is over $6 million per year. And that same data showed an additional loss of 100 full-time jobs. A study in Redwood City would probably show that the actual impact is even larger. The slip plan in the EIR implies that 262 private boat slips will eventually be available to boaters at Pete's, but the plan does not support that. Using the next door villas as a model, it's unlikely that more than a dozen private slips will be filled by the new residents at Pete's. The net result is going to be 250 unrentable slips. Unrentable because there's not going to be enough parking for non-resident boaters. So the proposal under consideration barely provides parking for the residences, and there's nothing in the EIR that realistically addresses how the slips can be utilized under the current parking limited proposal. Failure to address the boat slip problem will result in a tragic loss of use of the invaluable Redwood City waterfront and have a big economic impact that will adversely affect Redwood City from the day and for every day after
Dr. Hattery.
The Planning Committee approves. So don't approve it.
Allison Madden.
Good evening. My name is Allison Madden. I live at the harbor. I have been a Redwood City resident and a resident of San Mateo County for 16 years, ever since I moved south to Silicon Valley to work as an in-house attorney. And I lived in developments like this on the San Francisco waterfront, and so I'm very familiar with them. And I've been struck as I drove along Embarcadero there in San Francisco, how they kept Red's Java House. And I keep thinking, it's great to have development, but it's great to keep some part of the flair and the flavor. And something I want to say is, we've been seeking a lot of press and we've been getting it. I want to just go on the record here that sometimes we're misquoted. So sometimes it's good when the city sets the record straight and then we can have a debate back and forth. We do appreciate the press. As some people have said, we're going on a slogan of "This place matters," very much like HP's slogan, "Make it matter." This place does matter. It is, by any measure, a historical landmark. It's worthy of protection. I've gone to Sacramento. I've looked into the legislative history. This has always been a commercial use. People on the other side of 101 saved Pete's Harbor in the late 70s and 80s, and they never would have done it if it had been saved and out-of-state developers, multi-million-dollar, purely residential luxury housing complex never would have done it. The state of California, by the state legislature, Dominic Cortese, I've looked at every piece of paper I found in his correspondence that he brought the parties together, the State Land Commission and everybody with an interest, because of the commercial application, because it's open for the public, not just to the public with a couple parking spaces and a trail they can walk on. It's a big distinction. I did, for the record, I sent a very lengthy email asking for equal time as a parliamentary matter. I think that it deserves it. I think the Inner Harbor Precise Plan, there was no confusion. I'm submitting these letters. They're letters from Mrs. Uccelli over the years about the issue of having plenty of notice. It was always said the marina and harbor wouldn't change. Measure Q had liveaboards. So it's very disingenuous to act like people woke up every day thinking, oh, that notice clause in my lease means that today may be the day when liveaboards will be gone and there will not be a commercial harbor and marina. It's just not true. And I want to say that the Inner Harbor Precise Plan, it wasn't just to confuse and on a map. The actual announcement for the meeting in June said Pete's Harbor was in it. The announcement and people at the meeting expected that it was. This developer filed its plan in July 23rd, and now it's not in there. That is very compelling. The EIR is violated. People are acting like there are slips. People are going to Pillar Point.
Thank you, Ms. Hattery. Ma'am, sorry. Brenda Hattery.
Hi, I'm Ms. Hattery. This place matters. It's true. If you're being asked to consider a narrow view of near-term financial gain to the city of developing this property as 100% residential versus considering the big picture and long-term impacts to Redwood City and the general boating public, all Bay Area boaters, myself included, are impacted by the local land use trends which allow the development of bayfront lands for uses which are not water-dependent nor water-related and can be located on non-waterfront properties. These uses are inconsistent with both the California Public Trust Doctrine and good land use public policy for commercially zoned waterfront private lands. These uses increase costs of boating and reduce boater safety by reducing affordable access to a competitive waterfront population of marine industry vendors. You're not alone stuck between this rock and hard place. Boat US notes, spiraling land values for waterfront properties in the last few years have created a crisis for recreational boating. Traditional marinas with public slips are giving way to residential development. And then they go on to talk about the need to preserve sites for waterfront dependent commercial activities. It sounds very familiar. You are not alone. The bottom line is that you're being asked to set aside primary use of this property as a waterfront dependent commercial activity to put in a 100% residential bedroom community that could be located anywhere in Redwood City. In the general plan, you have quite a bit of very specific guidance on waterfront land usage, which the Planning Commission now has the opportunity to use on behalf of the public to guide this development project into something that works for the public as well as for the developer and the landowner. Do not ignore the Inner Harbor Plan and Pete's Harbor's removal from it after 6/25/2012. This in itself provides opportunity for the entire public to feel disenfranchised, and they do. We encourage you to develop this site. It is to be expected that a developer will propose a plan maximizing profit for the site's use. It's also expected that the landowner will do the same. They're doing nothing out of the ordinary. They're doing what's expected. Now it's time for you to do your part and do what's expected. It's your responsibility, and it's a great deal of responsibility, to really do the right thing, to look at the plan, and to pay attention to what was already said about parking and what's already been said about the slip loss. This same developer has had a very difficult time reopening any slips or getting permission to do so where there were over 400 slips at Peninsula. What is the plan about these 260 slips? How will they be kept, improved, and used? It's imperative that any development of an existing marina property today be managed carefully, public, private, no matter who's going to use those slips. It needs to be managed, or that water access is going to be lost to bureaucracies beyond your control.
Thank you, Mrs. Hattery. Susan Uccelli, followed by James Beebe, followed by Diana Reedy.
My name is Susan Uccelli, and Pete was my uncle. Save Pete's Harbor. That was years ago, and that was the state trying to grab my uncle's private property. That I almost find offensive because I find you hijacking my uncle's private property. You are not saving Pete's Harbor. Pete's Harbor, I grew up at that harbor. Unfortunately, we're the same age, so I was there before it was even Pete's Harbor. This is a good project. There is no greed here. It's about a woman trying to follow her husband's dreams, and she wants to sell her private property to follow that dream and his vision. This is a good project. Paul Powers has done such a wonderful job. Not only is he following what I know, what my uncle would love, he's done it in such a way that he meets all zoning requirements. He could build higher, and he's not going to. And the project brings jobs, housing, and much-needed dollars to this community. My Uncle Pete loved Redwood City, and he always wanted something better for it. He wanted to transform the harbor into something better, not just for himself, but for this community and the communities surrounding Redwood City. I know change can be difficult. It can be difficult when you know it's for the better. It can be difficult when you know you want it and need it. It can always be difficult. And it gets harder to do it as we get older. For the past 12 years, people have known that the property was going to be sold. Some people knew for months, some for years. Some tenants have moved. Others have plans to. Some say there isn't enough time. There's been 12 years, for some, like I say, months. And some people couldn't pick up the phone and call another harbor or the city then. Paula Uccelli did. She's the owner. She didn't have to. It's not her responsibility. When did it become Paula's responsibility for other people's private lives, for them to grasp what they need to do and do it? In a matter of a few short days of Paula's meeting people to update them on things, they were able to form a committee, go online, get a website page, Facebook, get a petition together, get people out on the streets to sign the petition, get a booth staffed at the port celebration, not to mention getting signs and posters made. And that's just the short list. I believe these people are very capable of taking control of their own property and lives without infringing on the lives and private property of someone else. They just have to take the time. I know it can be inconvenient for some people to do this. I know that, and it's got to be tough. But it's not Paula's fault, and it's not the developer's fault. My Uncle Pete chose Paul Powers because knew he was a good, honest, trusted, and respected man. I thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paula.
James Beebe.
Hi, I'm Jim Beebe, a resident of Pete's Harbor. I have a CSP in safety. I have a Master's of Science degree in safety, a registered environmental assessor, and 40 years in the health, safety, and environmental field. I happen to be on one of the FEMA heavy rescue teams, the same type of team that's currently rescuing people from Hurricane Sandy. My job on the team is to assess a site where a rescue is going to take place, to be able to see if there are any risks to the team from that site. Applying my same skills to the Pete's Harbor property, on the surface, it appears there have been some industrial operations there. The environmental impact report in 2003 lists contamination on the site, leaking underground storage tanks, and so on. It's all on page 12-3. It's known contamination. The One Marina development was approved on the basis of the 2003 environmental impact report, showing several sites of contamination near the site, but nothing on the site. At least one of the contaminated sites is on Pete's Harbor, and there's a big difference between digging, augering, or pile driving near known environmental contamination sites and doing that into and through contaminated environmental sites. If my team were going to dig on the Pete's Harbor site, I'd require environmental monitoring first, and you should too. There is no guarantee that the developer will be able to complete the project unless monitoring on the site is done ahead of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beebe. Diana Reedy?
Chair Schmidt and Planning Commission members, I'm Diana Reddy, a member of the Housing and Human Concerns Committee. Because the Housing and Human Concerns Committee assisted in the development of the city's housing element adopted by the City Council and certified by the state, I believe that it's important for us to remember goals that were deemed important in that document. Goal H2 was to promote, encourage, and assist in the development of housing that meets the needs of socioeconomic segments of the community. The objective of this goal was to consider an inclusionary housing ordinance that would require up to 15% of units within new market rate developments for lower and moderate income households. Goal H3 was to provide opportunities to meet Redwood City's share of the regional housing needs for all income groups and encourage a variety of housing types. The objective for H3 was to construct approximately 200 new units of affordable housing. So how are we doing? Of the almost 1,000 housing units currently in the pipeline, which doesn't include the proposed 411 luxury apartments proposed for Pete's Harbor, there are very few affordable units, and most affordable units that staff was able to negotiate with developers are for moderate income, which is $72,000 for a single person to $103,000 for a family of 4. In addition, because the 41 live-aboard slips at Pete's Harbor are valued affordable units, their loss, if this development is approved, will need to be made up by the city. The loss of the city's redevelopment agency does not absolve the city from keeping its obligation to meet the region's housing needs for all income levels, which raises the concern that not keeping those obligations could jeopardize the city's ability to get the next housing element certified. And not adopting an inclusionary zoning ordinance would prevent the city from being eligible for a future state funding program for affordable housing. In closing, I need to report that when I served as a facilitator for the Redwood City Threshold workshops, which focused on what Redwood City residents wanted for the future of Redwood City, and drew a broad spectrum of residents from our community, not one person reported wanting a city that he or she could no longer afford to live in. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Redding.
Ms. Redding, I'd like to ask you a question. Are you speaking on behalf of the Housing, Human and Concern Committee?
No, just as a member of the Housing and Human Concerns.
You're speaking for yourself then?
For myself, yeah.
Next, Linda Lavenbury, Jim Sanderson, Nancy Arvold. Actually, Nancy just spoke. Actually, Nancy, did you speak on the Pete's Harbor? No. Okay. So Linda Lavenbury, Jim Sanderson, and Nancy Arvold.
Hi, I'm Linda Levenbury, and thank you for letting me speak tonight. I also heard a lot of news about how Pete's Harbor was going to be changed and maybe to look like Cape Cod. Well, I just sold a house on Cape Cod, and here's a picture. It's really great. There's a house, lots of greenery, and kids playing. And I don't think that Pete's Harbor is going to look anything like it. They've got cute little houses around the area for kids to play. But my main issue is, first of all, the sewerage. I would like to know, out of the 642 units that are actually have been put up for one at Marina 1, and that's going to be scheduled what they chose over at Pete's Harbor. I would like to know about the system and how long that system is going to last. I'm also a property owner here in Redwood City, and I live in San Carlos in another home. And my concern is taxes. What is the situation with the sewage? If you plan on having any kind of blocks to keep the waters out for emergency situations, I want to know how you plan on taking care of that for any disasters that might happen, such as what's happening on the East Coast. I would also like to let you know that we voted twice against this. I've talked with a lot of people of my friends, people who own businesses, people who live here in Redwood City, and they've all said, we voted twice against this. I voted twice living here. And now you want to turn around and make a decision as a group of you on this planning committee, and you want to change the vote that the people in Redwood City have voted against twice. I don't mind Paula selling her property. That's great. I mean, I'm a property owner. I sell property and I buy property. But to turn around and go with the planning committee of Redwood City, who's making a final decision for what the people of Redwood City have already voted against twice, then you are taking away something that can really be part of Redwood City. Fun, kids playing, and a property that's not with so many people, and also because I owned a condominium, noticing the fact that Redwood City does not have any laws on how many people can exist in apartments. There's condominiums with 2 bedrooms with 9 people living in them, and you're making a disaster if you plan on this many people. And I hope that you save Pete's Harbor as the name and the place where everybody used to have great memories. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Levenbury. Jim Sanderson. Nancy Arvold.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, it's Dr. Arvold.
What?
I'm sorry, it's Dr. Arvold.
It is Dr. Arvold. I got my dissertation in Palo Alto, got my PhD a couple of years ago. It's going to be easy to rebut what we said. And I know there are people making lots of notes from the other side, and we won't have an opportunity to rebut the rebuttals. So we're in kind of a tough spot. My bet is that the project is within the law, and you can go ahead and do it. And you may be forced to do it by the kind of what your job is, and it's already been approved. But I don't think that the citizens of Redwood City did vote to have what's supposedly going to happen. We talked about revitalization of Redwood City, and my image of having the marina be like a mini Jack London Square, Sausalito, it will probably bring in more as being a popular site than having the condominiums. The condominiums will look like Redwood Shores, like Foster City. They won't have the character that we hope that Redwood City has. The what the project has been presented is really misleading. A couple of things, and specifically the Redwood, the Bay Trail that's been established so far is really the sidewalk in front of Marina One. And it's nowhere near the bay. And the sump, the thing that's supposed to help the runoff of the water, is actually dangerous. I tried to get across the street and get onto the sidewalk and didn't realize until I was partway down that it was really a dangerous place to go down, and it's hard to get to the sidewalk. So there's things that are misleading that haven't been really looked at. I checked out affordable housing. You know, we were told that there's affordable housing, RVs. As a social worker, I thought this was suspect, and I called the places, and there's almost no affordable housing that's available on that list. There's waiting lists that are 2 years long. There's some that won't take waiting lists. There were a couple of RV places that maybe had 1 or 2 openings for a 20-footer or whatever. But basically, what we're told about affordable housing, even in these crummy apartments that I've been in, are just not accessible. I had a number of other points. I know my time's almost up. The people that have moved away have been the ones that have had a lot of resources. And the marinas that are open are cherry picking. There's a lot of us, if we have 15 people and they have 3 slots for liveaboards, they're going to pick the ones that they want, and they can do that. There'll be a whole lot of us that won't be able to have that. And I would hope that the kind of discussion that you had with the Costco group that you'll have around this, it will be that critical in your thinking. Thank you.
Leslie Webster, followed by Lisa Riley, followed by James Jonas.
So, I've said before I'm a lousy speaker. Tonight I'm going to be a lousy fast speaker to get through this. So, I was going to talk about affordable housing, but I know you already know that you're jeopardizing the certification of Redwood City's housing element. I was going to remind you that we're homeowners, but you know that. I was going to talk about the good work some of the 184 tenants of Pete's Harbor has done. I was going to talk about my love of Redwood City. I was going to talk about fear, lies, deceitful letters, disappearing notices of hearing, changing maps, changing agendas, and the lack of public outreach. But instead, I'm going to talk to you about how grateful I am that we were able to attend other planning commission meetings. They were so interesting and so educational. For instance, we appreciate the attention you gave to the development at 145 Monroe, particularly your concern for the effects of the development project on one business, Oven Fresh Bakery. Everyone, especially Chairman Schmidt, expressed concern for the bakery. Commissioner Borgens even mentioned other businesses in the area and suggested that the bakery team up with the construction workers for lunches. I'm heartened because I'm sure you will show just as much concern for the more than 24 people and businesses affected by the Pete's Harbor development plan, because they will have to relocate out of Redwood City. I'm heartened because I'm sure you will show as much concern for the people who will have to quit or lose their jobs because they have to move to faraway marinas. The number of people who will have to take their children out of school. The number of people who will somehow have to find new medical treatment if they cannot live near the Palo Alto VA. The number of people who will have to sell their boats or RVs, their homes, their assets, at a loss because it's not the right season to sell. We also appreciate the considerable attention you gave to Costco's gas pumps, the increased traffic at Middlefield and Woodside, and its effects on the residents. We're sure you will give just as much consideration to the additional 2,400 car trips per day on Bear Island Road, the increased traffic at Whipple and 101, and Whipple and Veterans. We were also given hope by your attention to living green. Commissioner Radcliffe appears to be interested in green transportation, having mentioned zip cars and scooters at the 145 Monroe meeting. Commissioner Holt said, you can green that up a bit. Commissioner Borgens brought up EV charging stations. You know, somehow 2,400 additional cars in this high-density luxury housing project don't seem green. Chairman Schmidt said about 145 Monroe, part of it is creating great developments, great design. Have you seen the plans for Pete's Harbor? That's not great design. Commissioner Holt expressed concern about reservations for the roof terrace at 145 Monroe, and later stated, it's people. Yes, it is people. I'm sure you agree that the impact to 184 people is not trivial. Although we never mentioned 500 people at PortFest, if you include Peninsula Marina, the cumulative impact...
Thank you, Ms. Webster. We're not ceding time, I'm sorry, Mrs. Riley. So would you like to pass, or would you like to have... Okay. James Jonas.
Hi, James Jonas, resident of Redwood City. 3 cities, Moonachie, Little Ferry, and Karlstadt. They're just like you guys. They were located in North Jersey. And something happened. A levee broke. They were under 4 to 5 feet of water. When you build levees, you need to be very, very conscious about the risks involved. Now, the current plan that is proposed is suggesting a levee system to do sea level rise mitigation. Okay, first of all, if you put a wall up, you're only covering one part of a project. A half a boat does not float. So what is the other parts of the levees that need to be secured? Meaning, if you have sea level rise and you have a frontage road that is coming in toward the back, I don't see any coverage in that area, which means to me that the plan is incomplete in that area. Secondly, if you build a levee system, we're an earthquake country. There's a 63% probability of a major earthquake in this area. Now, what does that mean in this case? Kaboom? Well, first of all, sea level rises, kaboom, and instantly there's an inundation that takes place. Now, what's missing from this plan right now, and I'd like to see it, is that they need to take that earthquake risk and tie it into their sea level rise plan. And also they need to have a complete 360 coverage, because I don't see that right now. Because those things are absent, I believe that basically they haven't fulfilled their obligations under CEQA, specifically the earthquake section. Furthermore, with regard to sea level rise, you have a very, very special responsibility here. For example, land use, PS 5.3. Discourage development on land vulnerable to flooding from sea level rise. PS 5.4. This is off the general plan. Incorporate consideration of and measure to mitigate the risk of sea level rise in the planning process. That's you guys. PS 27. New development protected from flooding must consider sea level rise. And PS 29, flooding information and maps, other regulatory agencies. Just as a final note, there was a new set of regulatory agencies in the state of California that just issued a report on February 2012. They gave a new set of sea level rise statistics. Those need to be incorporated within any plan. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Jonas. Jeannie Hughes, Ellen Haas, Jerry Huff. So you are?
Ellen Haas.
Okay, Jeannie is not here? Okay. So Ellen, Jerry, and Dana Sanderson.
Good evening. I'm a friend of Polly Uccelli's, and I have been for a number of years. In fact, I still have vivid memories of walking the streets of Redwood City back in 2004 in support of Pete and Paula, knocking on doors to educate people about what they were trying to do at Pete's Harbor, and about the legacy that they wanted to leave for Redwood City. I remember the arguments that developed back then, that it would ruin the local ecosystem, that it would cause traffic nightmares, and mostly that it was just too big. I remember, like many others, experiencing a great disappointment when the first project was voted down. That's why I was so excited when I heard about this project at Pete's Harbor, the fulfillment of at least a little bit of that vision that Pete and Paula had for the harbor and for Redwood City. especially because this project fit within the existing zoning, and therefore it didn't really need any approvals. However, here we are again, back fighting over what the owner of a piece of property can do with her own private property. And I'm hearing the same old arguments. It's going to ruin the ecosystem. The EIR is too old. Traffic problems. And yes, of course, it's still too big. In fact, I don't really think that this is about size. I also don't think it's about what Pete's vision was for the harbor. I think what this all boils down to is people believing that they have a right to maintain the below market rents that Pete and Paula, out of the goodness of their heart, let them pay. Goodness has a price, doesn't it, Paula? And as a final note, I was on that committee that put on the anti-bullying fundraiser. Paula has long supported the PCRC, both financially and through her own personal efforts. I find it offensive that anyone would suggest that this wonderful, kind, giving woman is anything but a gift to Redwood City. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Haas. Jeffrey Huff? Oh, Jerry. Apologies.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Jerry Huff. Paul Uccelli has stated that Pete's Harbor has not sent any written notice of lease termination. Well, technically correct. She did state on September 20th meeting, and I quote, "You all have to move out by the end of the year, January 15th at the latest. When the sale goes through, we'll give you a 60 to 45-day written notice." That to me sounds like a verbal lease termination. They tell you about the 88 liveaboards, now 52, but they do not tell you about how many people are living in trailers and RVs, probably because they never got qualified as an RV park. The city of Redwood City does not have the authority to issue modifications or demolition permits for structures on land leased from the state, which includes the docks on the outer harbor, the buildings that house the bathrooms and laundry, and the building that houses the waterfront restaurant, which are wholly or partially on leased land. I urge you to vote no on this project. However, a compromise may be to reduce the project by 15%, which would be and allow buildings 1 through 5. This would allow the harbor and the RV rental space to remain intact and would allow them to build 351 units and only the dry storage and the Uccelli compound that would have to be affected. And you can put the condos anywhere. It's hard to park a boat without water.
Thank you. Dana Sanderson. Not here. Dave Hyman. No, yeah, if you... Thank you, Mr. Hyman. Andy Frisch, followed by Bonnie Miller, followed by Diana Paik.
Thank you, Commissioner, for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm here speaking for myself. I'm here to speak in favor of the project, and more specifically to speak to the good name of my dear friend Paula Uccelli. I first met Paula 25 years ago when Paula and Pete were helping to put on a barbecue to help Casa de Redwood, which had just been devastated by a fire. 25 years later, I am the president of the board of Casa de Redwood, an affordable housing community, and I know how vital their support was then and how it has continued to be over the years. I have tried in these 25 years to be an active and engaged citizen in my community. There has not been one project that I have been able to be involved with that has not been touched in one way or another by Paula and Pete. I have seen their generosity at Kainos, where I work. I've seen their concern for youth at the Sequoia Awards, where Pete and Paula created our first scholarship, and she helped found the organization too. I've seen her leadership at the Sequoia Hospital, where Paula recruited me to serve on the hospital's capital campaign. I've seen her compassion as she prayed for me when I faced challenges. Redwood City is a unique and wonderful community. We are blessed with many gifts: our diversity, our port, our strong business community, Kenyatta College, Sequoia Hospital. These are some of the reasons that we are different from surrounding communities. Pete and Paula Uccelli are a real and significant reason Redwood City is unique and special. I am here because my respect and admiration for Paula is tremendous, and I feel it is important to speak about the difference she has made. No one has ever asked me in my life about my opinion on aesthetic or architectural values, so I cannot address those who critique the project on these grounds. But I remain perplexed when people talk about our concerts in the park and the breaking of our civil fabric and the sense of community that will be lost. Our sense of community is certainly influenced by our buildings, our physical surroundings, and by your decisions, but make no mistake, our sense of community is fueled by the passion, commitment, and involvement of people who make up this community. And no one has done more for this community than Paula and Pete Uccelli. Please follow the staff recommendation, approve this development and propose modifications. Please reject the bile and negativity that some are spewing to this jewel of Redwood City. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frisch. Bonnie Miller. Diana Paik. How do you pronounce your last name?
Paik.
Paik.
My name is Diana Paik. I'm a recent resident of Pete's Harbor. I'm going to start at the end and just tell you what I would like you to do. And my suggestion and my recommendation is that a number of questions have been raised tonight about access and about other issues for which you do not have sufficient information to make an informed decision. And my recommendation is that you get answers to those and that you find out the answers and get people involved so that they understand why you're making the decisions that you're making. I'd like to support some of the things that have been previously said about access. As I go in and out Bear Island Road, and I go in and out at various times of the day and evening, what I've noticed is how difficult that road is to travel now with the current traffic situation. It is going to get increasingly difficult with an increased number of apartments, and you're talking about a lot of parking spaces and a lot of apartments in addition to building out of Marina One. You're going to have even more traffic. Just last night as I was coming home, a very typical situation happened where there was a vehicle carrier that was parked in front of the Chevrolet dealer and a vehicle carrier that was parked in front of the VW dealer, and a ladder from one of them going into one of the lanes, and a car being taken off going into one of the lanes, and that there are physical and visual hazards all the time on that road. It's a very difficult road to travel under the best conditions. Adding the amount of traffic that you're talking about is a huge increase in traffic, and the changes to traffic that were mentioned at the last hearing by the developer, we're talking about access for walking, for the trail. And if you look at the size of that road, there is no way to increase the size of that road for vehicle traffic. The additional road is going to be up next to Bayshore. It's not going to be out along by those new units and going out to Pete's Harbor. And if there were to be anything that happened, it's a seduction zone, and you're going to find people trapped out there. And so I'm just feeling that with all the other things that have been mentioned about access for people, the public, for people who live there, who will live there in the future, that it's something that you need to consider, and you have insufficient information to be able to make a decision on this issue tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Paik. And I would like to request that we take a little break, if that's okay with the commissioners, and we'll be back at 9 o'clock.